Welcome to another segment of Chop It Up with the Chairman. We're super excited this afternoon. We have Rockdale County's finest, our very own District Attorney, Alisha Johnson. DA Johnson, welcome to Chop It Up with the Chairman.
Oh, thank you, Chairman. I am so glad to be here to speak with you this afternoon. Looking forward to it.
Well, we're going to get right into this. We've been waiting for this opportunity to talk to you about several things, and I want to just jump right in.
Okay.
And I want to start out by asking you, just tell us a little bit about your journey into the DA's office, where you from originally, your background, education, and how you ended up here in Rockdale County. And I believe when I say ended up, it's a very positive thing.
Absolutely.
So take a moment and just give us a little bit about who Alisha Johnson really is.
Sure. So I was born and raised in the Bronx, New York. I am a native New Yorker. I'm the youngest of 3 children, born to parents who instilled in us a very strong foundation in God and Christ, always valuing family and, of course, education being the gateway to access. And I found my way to Georgia when I began to attend Spelman College. Graduated from there in 2002, and then about a year later, I began to go to Georgia State University College of Law here in Atlanta, and so that's what kept me here in Atlanta going to law school. And it was during my first year of law school where I had a course called criminal law. It was a required course. It's one that I did not necessarily think I would like. That was not the road that I was going to take. I was going to do healthcare law. I was going to be a patient advocate. And then I sat in my criminal law class and could not get enough. And for me, that was a game changer.
Wow, what a shift.
It was a shift. It's totally different, but not really, right? So I wanted to do patient advocacy with healthcare. And what drew me to criminal law was the people, right? Victims, being able to help victims, being able to see why do people commit these crimes and how can we help those people as well. So it's still in that sort of helping people through the law that I was attracted to. And so once I got that taste of criminal law, I began to do all kinds of electives, trial advocacy focused on trial work in criminal law, and began my internship experiences first back home in the Bronx DA's office.
Okay.
And then I came my second year of law school. I interned down in a circuit called the Talaga Circuit, which is south down by Butts County, Lamar County. Yeah. And then I had the opportunity to have an externship during my third year of law school here in Rockdale County.
Wow.
So at Georgia State, you're able to apply for law school credits at different prosecution offices. I applied for DeKalb DA's office, DeKalb Solicitor's office, and this county called Rockdale County DA's office. I interviewed with all 3, was accepted into all 3's internship experience, but there was something about Rockdale that called me.
Let's talk about that.
Yeah.
I want to hear that something about Rockdale. I like that. I like the way that sounds.
It was true. It was true because in full candor, I wanted experience. You know, I knew where DeKalb was. I knew about DeKalb County, and then I said, well, where else can I go to be able to get a thorough experience as a third-year law student? I would have the chance to actually go into the courtroom and practice as a third-year law student. Where else could I go? Rockdale DA's office was an opportunity whereby, you know, it's a unique experience because you got to do both misdemeanors and felonies in Rockdale DA's office, whereas in DeKalb DA, it was only felonies. In DeKalb Solicitor's office, it was only misdemeanors. So Rockdale really was the best of both worlds.
So real quick, let's take a moment and educate the people right in that space where you talked about, because in Rockdale, we don't have a Solicitor General.
We do not.
So explain what your dual or sometimes tri-role of your role as the DA, explain and educate folks who are watching this broadcast as what it means to have a Solicitor General and what it means to not have one in the case of what you're doing every day.
So Solicitor Generals, they're the ones who handle all the misdemeanor offenses, crimes where you can get a maximum of 1 year in custody. DA offices, they handle those cases that have felony cases where you get 1 year or more in custody for those crimes, okay? In Rockdale, we have the unique distinction of being the only DA's office in metropolitan Atlanta that handles all misdemeanor and all felony crimes, okay? So all those crimes that take place here in Rockdale County come into our office. So that means that we handle all of that here in Rockville.
So that speaks to the volume of your workload, your load of cases. Now, let me ask, because I don't know this, even as chairman of the county, you've already educated me, explaining that to me in the past, that you don't have a solicitor general. I come from a county where they have a solicitor general, and I know how that works, having been in law enforcement.
Yes.
But talk about the difference in the event that we had a solicitor general, not only that it will lower or reduce your workload or your caseload, what else does it allow you to be freed up to do as the DA here in Rockdale County?
Okay, so if you had a separate solicitor's office, then all of those misdemeanor cases would go directly to that office. That would mean that we will only deal with, in the DA's office, all felony offenses. That means that those cases in the solicitor's office would be focused solely on handling how those crimes would be handled in the solicitor's office. That would mean that there will be less cases that we would have to deal with in the DA's office. But when you combine the two, of a solicitor's office and a DA's office, that workload will double more often than not.
I'm sure there's many people that said, oh, wow, they didn't know this at all. Well, I tell you what, we are so proud of the work that you're doing. I want to get back on track. You were telling us about who you are, and you was talking about school, and then you talked about how you made it here to Rockdale County.
Yes.
Pick it up from there and just continue on.
Okay, sure. So during my third year, I interned here and was able to get a vast amount of experience in the courtroom. So even as a third year law student, I'm actually in the courtroom doing motion hearings. I'm actually looking at cases. I'm actually trying cases before a judge. So I'm getting that valuable experience before I even graduated from law school. And so once I was here and I was able to get exposed, if you will, Richard Reed, the former DA, saw my work, offered me a position, and I began to work here just after graduating from law school. So while I was studying for the bar, I was also working here under the Graduate Practice Act that allowed me to work as an attorney with supervision. Took the bar, passed the bar my first time, and was able to be a full-fledged attorney here in the Rockdale DA's office. And so that was in 2006. I've been working here ever since. Started in state court doing only misdemeanor offenses and sort of worked my way up, if you will. So I went from from intern to state court misdemeanor world to superior court felony world, handling all felonies, and now here I sit in the seat as the elected district attorney.
Well, I tell you, as I'm listening to how you matriculated from one level to the next, and then you talked about Richard Reed, now Judge Richard Reed,
Yes,
I can't help but to think about one of my favorite artists. In the line he has in his song says, "I don't want nobody to give me nothing. Open up the door and I'll get it myself."
I'll get it myself.
James Brown, that's exactly what Judge Reed did for you. And you weren't asking anyone to give you anything.
Absolutely not.
He opened the door, he facilitated on your behalf, but you had the credentials, you had the tenacity, you had the exposure, as you talked about that word. So we appreciate the Richard Reeds, the Judge Reeds of the world, because it's true that a lot of folks are not asking for a handout, they are asking for a hand up.
Absolutely.
Let's go back, because all of that is outstanding about your career and how you got here. We're going to talk more about that, but I want to go back to Alisha Johnson,
Yes.
the person. Talk a little bit about your parents. Tell us about your time in New York, your parents, a little bit about who they are, and then you have a family of your own. We want to hear about that as well.
Absolutely. So my mom is a retired registered nurse. She was a nurse for 52 years prior to retiring.
Yes.
So her life's work was about giving back in that capacity. My father was a retired teacher and also community event liaison. So his life's work was about giving back to our community as well and to serving as well. So in their deeds, they demonstrate to us the importance of working in your community, of helping others, of being of service, and that while we have our own gifts, not to store up your gifts and hoard your gifts, but to be able to use them to help those around you.
Unselfish giving.
Absolutely.
And I also clear here, because you put an emphasis and you also lit up when you talked and used the term education. Thinking about your mother having been a nurse for 52 years, that's unheard of today in today's time. And the fact that your father was a school teacher, an educator, and then a community liaison, all of that unselfish giving, it's in your DNA.
So it's interesting you say that, because they didn't say to myself, to myself and my siblings, go out and help people, go out and serve. They just did it. and they were the example that we saw. They didn't even have to
Absolutely.
tell us, you
Absolutely.
know. And when we saw the joy, when we saw the authentic love they had for people, and the help that they poured into the community, you can't help but to receive that and it be imprinted, you know, in who we were and who we ultimately became as men and women.
Yes, outstanding. How many siblings do you have?
I have two. So I am the youngest. I have an
Okay.
older sister,
Okay.
and I have a brother who's in between us. So,
Okay, very
yes,
good.
yeah.
And now you have a beautiful family of your
Yes,
own.
yes,
Tell
I
us
do.
about your family.
So my husband Ashanti and I, we actually met in college. He was a Morehouse College student, and I was a Spelman College student. We met by happenstance in that there's a tradition at Spelman and Morehouse where you get a random Morehouse brother and Spelman sister exchange. It was what it was called then. And he was my random exchange. So we met our first week in undergrad as strictly friends, you know,
Wow.
nothing more than that. And then as years went on, after we graduated, we began to date and ultimately marry. And I have 4 children. The oldest being 8 years old, that's Ethan. I have twins, a boy and a girl, Olivia and Grant, who are 5. And then I have the little baby, the caboose, Aiden, who is 2 years of age. And they are absolutely the joys of my life. And they are my inspiration, quite frankly. They're the reason that allow me to wake up every morning and remember the why I do this work, the why I wake up in the morning to make sure the joy that I see in their face, the peace that I'm able to give them in their home, the expectation of love is felt in their home, and I want to have that happen to other children and families here in Rockdale County. That's the inspiration for what I do as DA.
DA Johnson, a beautiful story, a beautiful picture. I think when we take a moment to share with the community and share with the world that we are real everyday people,
Everyday people.
when we can humanize the fact that you have a husband, have 4 children, half of that 4 are twins, that means that you're busy. You got a lot going on other than the work you do here in Rockdale County, but also, again, to humanize who you are as an individual. Oftentimes people see civic leaders, they think that's the end of their world, and that's what their world is centered around, is just being a civic leader or a servant leader. But you go to the grocery store, you do other things that other women do. You deal with some of the same issues that the people in our community deal with children and being a part of a household. And that is so important. And I think, let me just ask this question.
Yes.
How much of that real life world of being a mom, a wife, a sister, a daughter, a mother, how much do you think that plays a part or has an impact on the work that you do on a day-to-day basis?
Oh, it absolutely impacts and honestly is a foundation for the work that I do, because it allows me to draw, when I draw from that experience, draw from those feelings when I look at the people that come through our criminal justice process, right? Because it's one thing to be in this position, and it's a position of power, and view the work that we do as cases on our desk, right? These are people that have families, that have children, that have husbands, that have wives, that have families of their own, right? People who care for them as well. And when I think about as a vision for the office of how we are to treat those people, albeit victims, albeit witnesses, defendants, the parents of defendants in our case, I have to filter that through how would I want my own family to be treated? How would I feel as a mother if, God forbid, my child was in a circumstance of being either the victim or a defendant in this case, right? And so it definitely colors how, we create a culture in our DA's office of how we treat people. It also impacts how we view and examine cases. It impacts, how we evaluate what's the best way and what's the best manner to hold someone accountable. What's the best way to talk to a victim in this circumstance? What would I want, for my child, for my mother, if they were the victim in this case? So it absolutely colors how we work, how I operate in my capacity.
So, DA Johnson, when I listen to you, I can clearly hear your passion peeking through. In fact, it's purging all the way through, pressing its way in terms of who you are as an individual, both in a personal capacity as well in your professional capacity. But I want you to just take a moment to tell us a little bit about, I want you to think about three things. I want you to think about those three things that you're truly passionate about. I could hear your passion as you was explaining and sharing there a moment, but I want you to talk about those three things that you really are passionate about that really motivates you to do the work that you do here in Rockdale County.
Okay. One thing that motivates me is to be an example, a shining star of how to do this work with compassion, with justice, and yes, with mercy. I think that the DA's office here in Rockdale, we stand in a great position of being able to show other DA offices, other prosecution office, and the people at large that this space, while you may have seen things on a national level, right, while there is national rhetoric around prosecutors, around elected district attorneys, right, you can be able to rest assured that here in Rockdale County, if you think that's how it is, it's different here. That we certainly are about making sure this community is safe, that the people are safe, that we are holding the accused accountable appropriately, but that we are doing so in a way where it is just and it is equitable. I'm passionate about making sure our victims know what their rights are and that we support them and that we are making every effort to ensure that they are safe and will provide resources and help to be able to help them along the way. So I'm passionate about making sure our victims are at the center and the cornerstone of what we do, and that we demonstrate that in our deeds, in our actions every day. And I'm passionate about our youth. I'm passionate about making sure that we are investing in our youth's future. That when youth come into our system, that we are able to do things where we're not investing in what they've done, but can we find a way to invest in the future of who they could be?
Wow.
And that looks different, and that's different than your traditional prosecution journey. I'm clear on that. I'm clear that people may not feel the same way about that. But for me, I believe I was called to be in this seat to make sure that we invest in the youth's future, not in what they have done.
I so appreciate the way you explained that. I want to go back to those three things. You said compassion, justice, and mercy.
Yes.
We really appreciate that framework and that forecast of how you look at approaching what's happening in our own local community. There's so much that I want to talk about. Yeah. We're going to go to break in just a second. Okay. We're going to talk about the reality of the DA's office versus what people see on television. Right. You're listening and watching another segment of Chop It Up with the Chairman. I'm Chairman Oz Nesbitt, and our guest on this segment is none other than our own Honorable DA, District Attorney, Alisha Johnson. We'll be right back after the break.
Did you know that for every dollar paid in taxes, Rockdale County receives 18% or 18 cents? The remaining 82% goes towards the school system. That 18 cents from each dollar funds public safety, general government, court services, recreation, and transportation, which are all included in the general fund. The remaining 82 cents that goes to Rockdale County Public Schools funds instruction and student support, maintenance operations, transportation, general administration, and school administration, with about 70% going towards instruction and student support. Neither the Board of Commissioners nor the school board have any influence on how the other entity sets their millage rate.
Welcome back to Chop It Up with the Chairman. Hi, I'm Chairman Oz Nesbitt. We have our very own District Attorney, the Honorable DA Alisha Johnson, here from Rockdale County from our DA's office. So much information, I just don't know whether this segment can be long enough to capture all of the good information you talked about in the first segment of this this format of Chop It Up with the Chairman about who you are, where you from, your family, your parents. You talked about your siblings and your beautiful family. You shared with us your compassion, your passion, which centers around compassion, justice, and mercy. You also shared a different approach to how you view cases and how you embrace the cases, not looking necessarily at what a person has done, but how we can deal with the person, and even through the process of the judicial system. And I hope I'm saying it right, Madam DA,
Sure.
An opportunity to make sure that justice is there for the victims as well as the defendants, and making sure that it's an equal playing field. Talk about that a little bit, and then we're going to transition into TV versus reality.
Sure, absolutely. Well, we have to acknowledge, and I say we as leaders in this prosecution world, we as district attorneys have to acknowledge this criminal justice process and the historic facts of this criminal justice process. Those historic facts include that, this system was wielded as a weapon of mass degradation, of mass discrimination, of mass injustice. And we have to speak those words and acknowledge that, not for the sake of just talking about bad things that have happened and that happens still, but for the sake of making sure we don't repeat the ills of history, making sure that we strive intentionally to do what is right, to do what is equitable and fair for the ultimate good of the people who come through the Rockdale criminal justice process, for the ultimate good of the victim, and the ultimate good of public safety here in Rockdale County. So we have to acknowledge that as leaders, okay, because it impacts how we are then able to have compassion for the victims who come through this process and who may be reluctant to talk to even law enforcement and the district attorney's office, who is here to help, right? We have to address it and acknowledge that to be able to have compassion and understanding for those witnesses who may not want to talk to us initially, who may be reluctant to talk to us initially, because it helps us to understand and how to approach them and say, okay, maybe they feel certain ways about this process, right? But when we acknowledge it, recognize it, we're able to then address it in a very intentional way to be able to say, no, we are here to help you and we can show you through our deeds, right? We have to acknowledge it for our jury pool, for our jury panel, who may also have a real feeling about this criminal justice process from what they've heard historically, what they've seen on television and in the news. So we have to address and recognize the ills to be able to make sure we are dealing with it head on and appropriately, to be able to show that we are different, and that we are not what you may see on television, and that's not the reality here, the fact what you may see elsewhere.
That's a great segue. We're going to do a deeper dive into that, but right before we do that, I've got to ask you this question. How do you take your philosophy as the DA, as the leader of your office, the ultimate authority when it comes to law enforcement in the county in terms of the judicial process, how do you take your philosophy and your leadership and you spread that through the ranks of your employees, the people that work in your department? Because you are the DA and we're sitting here listening to your theory, and not really your theory, but the reality of your philosophy. You're living it out, and it's so authentic in terms of what you're saying to us. How do you get that into the minds of your investigators, your assistant DAs? Talk to us about how you do that in your office.
Yes, leadership is an action word. Okay, it's a verb. You got to do it every day. You have to talk to your people every day. You have to be clear in your communication about what the vision is, what the philosophy is, and then do it. Demonstrate it for your people. Talk to your people about it, I've been in this position now for 4.5 years, and it's crazy to think it's been 4.5 years because it's flown by. But I feel each year I'm getting stronger and stronger about making sure that I'm in there and talking to people. I'm making sure that we're going to trainings about leadership. So all of my top executive leads have gone to leadership training to be able to also demonstrate, indeed, my policy, my philosophy to pass on to their direct reports, right? So you have to continually speak to what the standard is. You have to demonstrate that standard and talk to your people every day about what the standard is. And there's nothing less than what the standard and philosophy and policy is. And get in there. I'm in the courtroom. You'll see me in the courtroom. You know, you'll see me plea a case, right? I'm in there talking about the actual cases and talking to our young attorneys especially about my philosophy, being my proxy. You know, I have policy handbooks on what my philosophy is. So if ever you have a question and I may not be there immediately, you can go to that policy book and see what would Alisha do in this posture, right? What would her philosophy be? Because ultimately, and I make it very clear, and I don't say this, you know, with any kind of hubris, but I say this in full candor, I am the DA. The people of Rockdale County elected me to be the DA. And I'm okay with saying that, because what that means is that you may have an opinion, but ultimately if your opinion about a case or your philosophy on a case differs from mine, and you know what mine is, but if it differs from mine will always trump. Okay? And if you have a problem executing that, it's okay for us to have another kind of conversation. And I don't say that again, you know, with pride or trying to be braggadocious, but I'm very clear that I have been called here and I have been asked by the people to do this job. And they want me to do the job based upon the philosophies that I have. And so it would be derelict of me to not ensure that the people who I have asked to come and work on my behalf don't also follow suit. But be clear, it takes an everyday effort of making sure that is happening.
Dear Johnson, I heard so many things in that response. One of it was clearly leadership by example. You're not just advocating or preaching this to the people that's part of your team. You're in the courtroom, you're actively involved. You're constantly communicating with them to make sure that they are clear in terms of what your philosophy is. And I even like the way you framed it as you was closing your response about, listen, I'm not bragging about this, I'm not being arrogant about this, but it is what it is. And if there's, for some reason, you can't buy into this or embrace this form and this style of leadership, we can talk about your options. So I really do appreciate that. I respect your leadership. We do know it's important to have leaders who have a clear, defined definition as to what the role is, what the responsibility is, and how to execute it, but doing it in a tangible, touchable kind of way. And that's exactly what you're doing. I want to shift now. I want to shift because there are so many things that's going on in our world and our country right here in metropolitan Atlanta. As you know, Rockdale County is one of the 11 counties that make up Metro Atlanta. So we are watching across the metro. I'm a news junkie. As you know, I've spent some time in law enforcement in the past. So it's in my blood, so to speak. So I like to stay abreast and aware of what's going on around me. I want you to talk about the difference in what people see on a television show. You alluded to it a little bit, but I want you to talk about the real DA's office and tell us the difference. And you may be familiar with a few of those shows out there, but I want to talk about the reality of how all of your passion of compassion, justice, and mercy, all of your leadership and your philosophy, let's be open-minded and clear with a very objective approach in terms of case by case. Tell us about what's real versus television.
Okay. Well, let me just say this. I love those shows myself. I was a Law and Order junkie. I love the practice. I was all about it. Ally McBeal put me in, right? Loved it. I have yet to have a circumstance of that nature, as you know, in this capacity. But it's entertainment, right? It is for fun. Let's be clear about that. And everything gets resolved nice and neat, and the answers are simple, right? On television, you know, what is right and wrong is very clear cut. It's black and white. In this role, we deal strictly in the gray. Okay. There's so many components to what it takes to make a decision in the DA's office, because ultimately, you know, our job is to be ministers of justice. That's what it's called in the law. We are ministers of justice. What that means is that we take into account various issues and circumstances. Whereas your public defender or your defense attorney, their sole job is to take care of their client. Us, as a district attorney's office, prosecutors, our role is to make sure that all parties involved have the best outcome. Okay, that's gray. So we're looking at what's in the best interest of course, the victim in our case, what's in the best interest of the community as a whole, public safety, what's going to keep the community safe. And we also look at, well, what's going to be best, the way to affect and deter crime for this defendant? What does that look like in the best way? So that's a huge gray area that has, overlapping issues and concerns. It's not always perfect, and it requires hard work. It requires tough thinking. It requires you to go home at night and sleep on the issue sometimes and come back and confer with your coworker. So it's tough work in the gray. On television entertainment, it's black and white. You see who's bad, you see who's good, done in an hour, right? Not to mention on television, they have limited resources, phenomenal resources. I would love to have the boards, and all of that. I would love to have, endless amount of money to just spend to do with, but we have to be good stewards of the taxpayer dollars.
That's right.
We're cognizant as to every pen we buy. We're cognizant as to everything that we do when it comes to spending our money and resources, because it's not ours. It is the taxpayers' dollars. And so we are cognizant of that when it comes to what do we use, what do we purchase, what do we need to be able to effectuate our cases appropriately and to try our cases appropriately. So we don't have the endless resources, right? Not to mention they have tons of people that work for them on television. I'm like, where do you get all those people, We don't have the endless amount of work power of the people that come to work, for government. Because I do believe if you come to work in any government office, you feel called. It's a calling. It's a public service.
Yes, it is.
It's a public service.
Yes, it is.
And when it's a public service, you don't get paid private equity money.
No, you do not.
But you care, and you do it because you love it. You do it because you want to help people. And that is in any position that we have in our DA's office. That's in any position that you have in your government office. People care about what they do, And what we do as government agencies is important work. It's important work, but it's also a calling. And so to that end, the people that we have are there because they care. And sometimes it's hard to get people to come on in,
Right.
But they are called to be there. And so I think those are the big differences between the real world and the entertainment, world.
Right. You did a great job distinguishing between television and reality. I like the way you talked about what's in the gray, and that you spent a good bit of time operating in the gray. You talked about Law and Order. My wife, that's one of her favorite shows, Law and Order. I can hear the doom doom
right.
on Law and Order. And I'll tell you, I watch a lot of news. I like Food Network and that kind of thing, but I do enjoy watching Tom Selleck in Blue Bloods.
There you go.
And the world of him being the police commissioner is not always as real as it appears. Actors and actresses, they make it all look so easy.
It is, yeah.
I wanted to talk about that because oftentimes the people in the general public, they only have that to gauge and to measure what they think the DA office is all about. And you just clarified a lot of things, showing what's on stage in terms of resources, people and personnel, and even talking about the outcomes of some of those picture perfect scenarios that they have. They're great, they're warm and fuzzy, but they're not reality. And they're certainly not in the gray.
Right.
Let's shift again. I want to talk about all of these things that are happening in our country right now. It seems that the world, and certainly the United States, is in turmoil. We've got so many different things going on. I don't want to box you in, and I'm not going to do that, but I will ask you, share what you feel comfortable sharing as relate to gun violence. And as you know, Governor Kemp just passed a new law that will allow folks to go in a different direction as it relates to gun and obtaining a gun. But talk about, in a general sense, and however you feel comfortable, this whole thing of gun violence. I mean, night after night, Madam DA, we're watching on the local news so many things that are happening in our region, in our state, in our country. Tell me your thoughts about what you're seeing and what's happening right now.
Well, it's interesting. I just had this conversation this morning with my chief assistant DA, and I was telling her, over the course of the last 16 years that I've been in this prosecution world, literally every year I've watched gun restrictions get whittled away. There was a point, when I first started where you couldn't even carry a gun in your vehicle, right? And then over time, it just became more and more access and more, of the ability to be able to have a gun on your hip. Now, there's no need for these permits. So we have whittled away at any kind of restrictions that there are when it comes to the carrying of gun. And ultimately now, it's available for all to have. And while you hear, the rhetoric of, well, guns don't kill people, people kill people, that is true. But when you have restriction and you have limited access, there is a direct correlation to there being less gun violence. And this is not by happenstance. We're not happening to see this gun violence increase, just coincidentally as the restrictions are being limited or being lifted. It's happening in tangent. It's happening because now you can go and get it and it's available. There's no more fighting, as a form of aggression. It's I'm going to pull out my gun that I have easy access to have and have a right to carry on my hip, and I'm going to resolve my aggression in that way.
Nearly 95,000 residents here in Rockdale County, a little over 94 point something, almost 95,000 residents. Right. You have them as a captive audience right now, at least about a third of them. Okay. What do you say as the DA of Rockdale County on that subject of gun violence, access to guns, and personal protection? Speak to them right now.
What I will say is this. I'm a firm believer in your right to carry a firearm. There's no question about that. But we have to be responsible. We have to ensure that we are our brother's keeper, that we are being good neighbors to each other. Gun violence is serious. The impact that it has here in Rockdale County, in Georgia, nationally, is causing trauma, it is causing lifelong issues for our children, for our people, and it's important for us to think before we pick up a gun. It's important for each of us to remember that in a moment, grabbing a gun may seem like the only way to go, but you must make a different decision. Your future depends upon it. The safety of this community depends upon it. And we have to go a different route. I'm asking everyone to think twice about the number of guns you need to have in your possession. I'm asking everyone to think twice about what's in your own personal homes. Look in your homes to see what is there, what's around. We can't turn a blind eye to the impact of guns in our community. As a DA, as the chief, public safety and law enforcement officer here in this community, we take gun violence very serious. We take gun violence as being the ultimate form of violence that is ripping apart families, that is ripping apart this community, and we will not tolerate it. Public safety is the number one issue that we are focused on, and we are determined to make sure this community is safe.
DA Johnson, thank you for that, and I'm sure that being able to speak straight from the heart, your experience, your wisdom, your day-to-day engagement with this community and what you're seeing in the national outlook of what's happening. I'm going to shift again. I'm monitoring our time. You bring so much to the table in terms of this segment of Chop It Up with the Chairman, but I want to shift just a moment because as you so eloquently were able to talk to our community about gun violence and how to handle themselves for the most part, I want you to talk about restoration of faith in the criminal justice system, but I want you to personalize it. Okay. I want you to talk about, so maybe my question is this: how does the citizens in Rockdale County have faith in the Rockdale County DA's office, what is it you want them to know for those who've never engaged with you before, and for whatever the reason might be, they may become one of your clients for whatever the case may be, in terms of engaging with the DA's office, and for those people who may even be currently going through a process right now. Having faith in DA Johnson and her team here in Rockdale County. Talk about folks having faith in your office.
Absolutely. Well, that faith is going to come in the form of understanding what our ultimate mission is. That is to protect the victims of crime, right? That is to prevent any kind of future crimes happening by holding those who have been accused and that we can prove, have committed these crimes, by holding them accountable, okay? Accountability is the way in which we deter future crimes. It sends a message to others that we are not going to tolerate lawlessness, that we are not going to tolerate anyone committing crimes in the community. It also helps to deter those who have been accused of crimes, that we are going to hold you accountable. And so, when we focus on that prevention and protection of those rights, we're making sure that we are doing it in a way where we look at each case individually, that we are evaluating each case in a way that will best deter that future criminal behavior, that will best protect the victim, and that will ultimately keep the people of Rockdale County and this community safe, okay? We are an example here in Rockdale County of what it means to do the work, to work hard, and to make sure that those who come through this system as a victim, as witnesses, as the accused, are given a fair shot, are looked at individually, and that we are doing the best that we can in our recommendations to deter conduct, to make sure that we are doing it in a way where they can be safe here in the community, and that we are ensuring that those here in Rockdale County are safe and can trust the DA's office is focused on their safety.
Outstanding. So we often hear pleas and cries from our local police department and our local sheriff's office about the citizens helping the police, or the citizens helping the sheriff's office.
Yes.
How can the citizens help the DA's office?
Well, I think in tandem with the sheriff's office and the City of Collins Police Department, what they're saying is that we need for us all to work together. That it is a community effort to make sure that your neighbors are safe, that your friends are safe, that when you see something suspicious, or when you, God forbid, witness a crime, that you call 911, that you agree to speak to what you saw, that you agree to be a witness to what you saw and provide that important information to law enforcement, which will then come to the DA's office, because we are an arm of that law enforcement. We are the ones where once a person is arrested by law enforcement, we receive the case, we evaluate it, and we need to make sure that we have those witnesses and the victims speak to what happened. Ultimately, we need to be able to know what takes place to be able to hold someone accountable. And again, in that accountability is where there is deterrence of crime. Because guess what, people? We need criminal laws. Okay? If we did not have these criminal laws, I'm going to tell you right now, there will be lawlessness. There will be chaos in the streets. And if you think otherwise, you are fooling yourself. The question is, how are these laws executed? How are these laws evaluated for justice's sake, for the sake of making sure people are safe in the community? But make no mistake, we need these criminal laws on our books and executed appropriately. If, God forbid, I said one day, you know what, the DA's office will not prosecute entering automobiles. Guess what you're going to see a whole lot of? Entering automobiles.
Yes.
Right? And then what we're able to enjoy as members of the community are our parades, right? Our firework displays, our festivals that we love and that we enjoy throughout the year.
Exactly.
Those things will then become a scary place to go. You may not want to go because it's going to be lawlessness. So we need the community's effort to help ensure that we are able to prosecute and hold offenders accountable appropriately, so we can enjoy living with fun and excitement here in Rockdale County.
D.A. Johnson, I'm telling you, this has been an award-winning segment of Chop It Up with the Chairman. I've got just two things left I want to ask you about. The first one, you've been speaking to all of us here in Rockdale County and all the folks who are going to watch this segment of Chop It Up with the Chairman. But I want you to zoom in just for a moment and speak to the parents in Rockdale County. What would you say to the parents in this community? Because I think the young people, they've heard you in this segment. You've spoken to the youth of this community through so many things that you've explained about how the DA office works. But I want you to talk to that parent, because when I hear these stories about the gun that was taken to school, when I hear these stories about the parent who left the child in the hot car, when I hear about the shooting at the parade, or all of the celebrating with the gunfire. I can't even pronounce it the right way, but celebratory gunfire. Folks just shooting up in the air, not understanding that what goes up must come down. Accountability is what I heard you say through and through this segment. Speak to the parents. What does the DA and her office says to the parents here in Rockdale County?
Well, as a parent, I will say this. When that child comes home with you and you look into the eyes of that child and that baby, you think about all the wonderful things that they could be. You think about all the opportunities that you would love for that child to have, things that you may not have been able to have, things that you may not have been able to experience. You hope those good things for your children. It's important for us as parents to carry on that hope in an everyday fashion, in a very real-time fashion as our children get older. And part of that is making sure that we maintain that role of parent, making sure that we are cognizant to who our children are hanging around with, that we are cognizant and know where our children are going. And most importantly right now with this generation is making sure we know what's happening on our children's phones, what they have access to on those phones through social media, right? Through the TikToks, through the Instagram and all the other social media sites, because what we're pouring into our children is one thing, but what they now have access to that we didn't have is different. And so while you may be pouring important and meaningful and valuable character into your children, we got to be cognizant as to what they are receiving from who knows where via their phone. And so, I know the people and the parents of Rockdale County love their children. I know the parents of Rockdale County would hate for anything bad to happen or occur to their children. So I don't need to say that. But what I will say is that we have to work together to make sure that we know what they are receiving outside of our presence. I don't want to see your children in this criminal justice process. I don't want to see any of our children in this criminal justice process. If it was up to me, put this DA's office out of business because we are not having any more come through this system. I would love that to be the case. But it's going to take a concerted effort from parents, educators, the village, if you will, to wrap your arms around our children to make sure that we are able to overcome what they are receiving outside of your home and filling that with good character, good opportunities, good experiences to overcome what they are receiving in that social media.
D.A. Johnson, I tell you, it's going to have to be a part 2 to this segment. You've brought so many good things and very valuable information to the citizens of Rockdale County and all of those who's going to watch this segment of Chop It Up with the Chairman. The last and final thing is very personal, and I typically ask most of our guests a few of these questions. So I want to start with you. What's your favorite food?
Oh, Italian food. I love eggplant parmesan.
So do you have a favorite Italian Rockdale restaurant for Italian food?
So, yeah, I have, let me see here. Milano's, of course.
Okay.
Milano's. That's the go-to spot.
All right, very good.
Yes.
So Italian food and Milano's is your go-to spot in Rockdale County. Music. Tell us about your favorite music. What genre of music?
I am a R&B soul kind of girl.
Okay.
You know, R&B soul. I like 90s R&B in particular.
Okay.
But I'm also a huge Beyonce fan.
Okay. Yeah, I was going to ask you who's your favorite artist. So Beyonce hands down.
Beyonce, well, but I'm a classic girl. I love Luther Vandross and Michael Jackson and Prince too.
Okay. All right. Very good. Very good. What's your favorite color?
Red.
It's obvious, absolutely. Red rocks in Rockdale County.
There it is.
Absolutely. D.A. Johnson, this has been a fantastic segment of Chop It Up with the Chairman. We appreciate the fine work that you and your office is doing.
Thank you,
people are now more informed. They're more educated about the work of the DA office, the District Attorney's office here in Rockdale County. I think it's unique because you set yourself apart. You don't have a Solicitor General. You're doing things. You've embraced this thing. You've actually bear hugged the whole judicial process. That may change down the road because our community continues to grow and expand. You can't do it all yourself. I'm hearing you loud and clear. We appreciate your philosophy, your message to your leadership team, and the message to the community. But we also appreciate your being authentic and your realness of being a parent, you're a wife, you're a mother, and your whole embracing of the education system, knowing that education is clearly still the way for people to have a path forward into a positive life. Folks, you've been watching another segment of Chop It Up with the Chairman. I'm Chairman Oz Nesbitt, and you're tuned in right here on Channel 23.